We'd like to welcome you all very warmly, all the people who are watching and all our lovely panelists that are here with us today. It's been a very interesting session so far and summit, starting off with John Bell. We are having our session today where we are asking our panelists and you are who are participating to think deeply with us on our systemic thinking on urban landscapes and nature-based solutions. And we're thinking, how are we disrupting towards harmony, or this idea of making peace with nature that John was speaking about this morning, especially over the next 30 years as we get into really implementing and bringing forward the European Green Deal. My name is Roisin Byrne, and I'm a landscape architect, nature-based landscape architect, and also co-ambassador with Barbara and Monica for urban landscapes on the Connecting Nature platform. We must say that this is recorded and will be available on the platform after the event. And we really look forward to your participating with joining in our discussion. To do that, Monica's just said there, all the chat and questions and answers could be there. If you want to jump in at the second part, we really invite by putting your comment or question up in the questions and answers section. And we would like to really bring you in as much as you like. We by inviting Barbara to speak and share her perspective. Over to you, Barbara.
Hi there, thank you, Rosie. I'm Barbara Goličnik-Marušić. I'm a head of research at the Urban Planning Institute of the Republic of Slovenia, which is a national research center for urban planning and related disciplines. My background is in landscape architecture, and I've got a PhD from the University of Edinburgh, UK. But at the Institute, I currently work on the nature-based solutions as a concept, as well as a set of actual solutions in relation to urban planning and design. And I'd like to share with you some thoughts related to that this early afternoon. So just to briefly remind, nature-based solutions are solutions based on the principles of nature, either using the elements of nature and simulating its processes and principles. In urban planning and design, there is a need for understanding nature-based solutions with the parameters of planning. Respecting by that their original connectivity, of course, to biodiversity, green infrastructure, and urban open space development, design, and maintenance, but going beyond provision of, let's say, green-blue infrastructure, and addressing also urban morphology, built structure patterns, materials used, and buildings orientation, for example. This is especially crucial as for example, again, in historic city centers or any other dense urban areas, there is often not enough room to introduce green spaces to achieve the wanted effects. So what I want to say is that nature in cities does not apply only to green or blue spaces. Physical world processes are also parts of nature. For example, geological processes, matter and the energy processes, and in that sense, properties of the location, such as natural ventilation by wind blow, local materials, their use, also closeness of their resources, such as natural stone, wood, or shading because of the steepness of the location, orientation of the location, also orientation of the existing and the planned building structure on it. They all can be very well addressed also by the nature-based solutions, or at least by potentials for applying nature-based solutions. So for the purpose of urban landscape planning and design, I'd like to support an argument also for seeing nature-based solutions as a system. going beyond single interventions, such as green roof here, green wall there, rain garden somewhere else, and so on. In urban planning, we should be heading for connecting solutions of different kinds to solve specific issues or challenges. So when setting up a system of solutions, then it is of key importance also a good knowledge about the mutual effects of different nature-based solutions or the multifaceted effects of individual solutions. And these issues have not been adequately addressed so far, and really it call a broader attention. Also, they have not been specifically studied for different types of urban tissues. So this also calls an attention to areas of impacts of the nature-based solutions. For successful implementation of nature-based solutions in urban landscape, buffer zones of effects or cumulative effects the nature-based solutions might bring to places for people, environment, or even economy are crucial. So some examples, for example, just as an illustration in practice, how much rainfall water from the built areas of a city can be captured by the nearby park? Was it adequately planned? Was it adequately designed? How big it should be? What orientation and the ratio of planted and unplanted areas to have to successfully play also the role for cooler? Or what size and shape and with what ratio of open and planted or shaded areas it should have again to successfully meet users' needs or expectations for rest and recreation. So how far away from it the next nature-based solution, not necessarily a park, should be introduced to cover such or similar issues in the cities, which we all know range from greenhouse gas emissions and temperature reduction, urban water cycle control and an improvement, noise reduction, air quality improvement, and so on. So these are the messages I wanted to spread. If we still have time, I have a slide which I would kindly ask Mansa to share just to make those key points. I want to stress the understanding of the nature-based solutions within the parameters of planning, a recognition of nature-based solutions in the physical world processes as part of nature, and in relation to that, of course, the potentials of locations. To see nature-based solutions as a system, also to develop a good knowledge about the effects of nature-based solutions, and in relation to that, to pay a greater attention to nature-based solution impact areas to successfully deal with the issues in urban landscape planning and urban landscapes as places. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. There are a lot of deep thinking points where we think in whole systems and of the effects and the full journeys and interconnections of nature-based systems. Natasha, could you share your slides and your presentation, please? That would be lovely.
Yes. Okay. So let me introduce myself briefly. So my name is Natasha Tanasova. I'm associate professor at the University of Ljubljana at the Faculty of Civil and Geodetic Engineering. So my background is environmental engineering, focused mostly on water management. And my latest interest and what I'm dealing is mostly is sustainable use of resources. So why I'm saying I would like to emphasize on the resources, because water is also food and it's also energy. So basically, if we manage to sustainably, let's say, manage water, it also impacts heavily on how we manage our food systems and energy systems. And when we talk about resources, it means that cities are basically the biggest, there is the biggest demand for resources in cities, in urban areas. So our, let's say, major task is management of resources in cities. And I would like to briefly present you a few outcomes of our ongoing cost action, which is named Circular Cities. I will just try to explain the major challenges that we are facing in cities that are related to circular management of resources. So basically, within this action, we have identified like 7 major challenges that cities are facing in order to shift to circular management of resources. And when we talk about circular management, or what does it mean, circular city, it means that this is a city that reduces or minimizes the import of fresh resources and also minimizes waste production. So in order to achieve that, we have identified 7 urban challenges, and the first one is to...
Oh dear, we've lost Natasha. Maybe she comes back. Patrick, are you ready to speak now?
Thank you, Roisin, everybody watching, and to my colleagues on the panel. My name is Patrick McCabe. I'm a landscape architect and founder of Redscape. So that's an office that works primarily in the Netherlands and also in Ireland. And I've been actually asked to contribute to the discussion today from the perspective of the landscape architect. And just maybe to explain that our company is called Redscape, and that is about connecting different parts of the city. So it's red is the symbol of the built environment, with scape, which is the unbuilt environment, to create a kind of an approach called Redscape to actually deliver synergies between both. And we do that by also adding different values into this approach, such as nature-based solutions, co-creation, and various other ideas, such as reinventing the sense of space within that as well. I think it's important maybe to mention that central to all our projects is the whole idea of community, and actually delivering ecologies of communities for each project. So for us, it's perhaps less relevant what the type of project is, whether it's a waterfront or a port, or whether it's a park, or whether something else. It's really about creating these ecosystems of communities first and foremost. And our experience teaches us that that is the best way to deliver a project, with a healthy combination of top-down, bottom-up, and both of these working together to give a complete community. The next thing is that there are 3 basic qualities that the landscape architect has to offer, if you like, this interconnection between different sectors, and that is number 1, the idea of co-creation. So this is obviously not just the realm of the landscape architect, but to other individuals. But this is something that the landscape architect can develop very well. This idea of co-creation. The second one is I'm just trying to remember it from the slides. The second one is, what was it again? Excuse me, I know what it is. It's actually design thinking and creativity. So this aspect of non-linear thinking is extremely important. This is essentially why we get paid. We get paid to deliver creative solutions, where 1 and 1 is 3, put very simply. And so our imaginations can allow us imagine things and deliver new ideas that wouldn't have been thought of before, and with all kinds of benefits. And the third thing, which is extremely important, is the idea of the plan or the drawing. And we have worked off plans and drawings, for example, that are literally 400 years old in terms of assessing new designs. And the example I was to give was a slide of the Beemster boulder, which is a UNESCO monument. It's 8,000 hectares, designed in the 1600s. And we actually use that basic plan for reorganizing parts of the boulder, in particularly the agricultural areas and allotments and the changes in agricultural systems. So I think that's very, very important. If we put these qualities together, we can then apply them and to give directions for new kinds of tasks in the spatial environment that cross over sectors. And I have 3 examples. The first example was the idea of bio-based chemistry, where we did an exploration into replacing, if you like, petroleum-based products with local bio-based products from new forms of agriculture in and around and local to the area of study, which was Terneuzen in the south of the Netherlands. So basically the idea of replacing these petroleum products with a high value local product is certainly feasible and achievable. And again, it creates this interconnection between the chemical industry and the local stakeholders around, for example, in this case, farmers and also nature organizations. The second project, just to demonstrate the idea, was an international exchange for flood protection that we organized between the Netherlands and Ireland. And those projects were there to demonstrate that, in fact, 60% of the solutions could be achieved using nature-based solutions. At the moment, 80 to 85% of the flood protection being proposed in Ireland at the moment is actually based around the idea of walls, which are obviously a huge discontinue for biodiversity, but also visual and amenity connection to rivers in the various different towns and cities in the country. So that's another very good example of how landscape architects can play that role. And the final project that I wanted to show was the idea of the green port, where we actually started studying ports and how they could be better integrated into the city. And as a case study, we took Dublin Port, and we then pitched the story to Dublin Port, and they very kindly invited us to work out a component of that, which was called, if you like, the Greenway, which is a 4-kilometer connection around the coast on the north side of the port. And the idea of that is that will be built, and it forms part of a wider vision that we have for the port to create the city's 3rd largest park, which is actually circumnavigating the port itself and connecting the city into the port. So yeah, I think that's my presentation. It's about these 3 basic qualities, and if landscape architects at least get the opportunity to apply these skills that they have, then they can really begin to, if you like, set the agenda for all kinds of new themes and demonstrate spatially how these various objectives could be achieved. And I'm just looking at various examples, but of course we could also talk about energy transition, any number of other kinds of projects and current developments within the city and within the landscapes. Thank you, Roisin. Back to yourself.
Thank you very much. It's a really highly and big systems thinking approach, which can be applied locally and regionally and nationally throughout Europe. Jumping, I would like to invite Damjan to present, and then we'll bring Natasha on afterwards just to close up the presentation. Jillian, are you ready to go, Damjan?
Okay,
Great.
Hello everybody. Hello. I'm Damian Marušić from Dipstore, the furniture design studio. My background is in architecture and civil engineering. I'm holding PhD precisely in structural dynamics and earthquake engineering. But now, last few years, but also quite some time ago, I started with furniture design. Now I will not share with you anything but my thoughts. I have no presentation, except Mansa might share with you a short introduction video that was recorded for the use of this project.
This is Damian, the head of development from Dipstore, innovation-oriented SME from Koper, Slovenia, a country about 60% covered by forests. We develop wooden furniture without artificial materials using domestic wood species, 100% natural processing with no chemical additives, biodegradable and recyclable. Our furniture won several international design awards and have been recognized as excellent eco-product.
Thank you, Mansa. Okay, that was obviously me on this video, but more importantly, there were some pieces of our sitting furniture, which was predominantly for the time for home use, but we are turning our focus now to furniture for public use and urban spaces. Our designs tend to connect with the nature at least in 2 points. We tend to use exclusively natural or nature-based materials, and we are trying to design our products in the way that they can be produced and used with minimum harm to environment. Our predominant material is wood. In the way, all materials are nature-based, but in this context, I understand the nature-based materials as the natural materials which may be physically modified, for example, thermally treated or even treated with some chemicals, natural or nature-based if possible, in order to obtain desired properties, for example, resistance to humidity or insects, etc., or to obtain desired shape. But the use of these procedures should minimally affect the environment. There is no perpetuum mobile in this field, of course. So minimum harm to environment starts with minimum use of material, minimum transport, minimum use of energy, minimum waste at production, maximum duration of use, minimum waste during use and after the end of life cycle of the product, and possibility of recycling and reuse. Technologies for production of furniture, as for any other product, include tools, machines, and consumables that are not necessarily nature-based or ecologically produced. We usually cannot avoid all that. However, in product design, one could consider also this aspect. Nothing is really 100%, but we can try to get as close as possible. This idealistic picture usually crashes at economics. When a small producer wants to buy some material, wood for example, the price is much higher than for the big corporation. If you want even guarantees that net material is from sustainable source, it's even worse. Domestic sources are often redeemed in advance by big international players, so only imported wood might be available or its price is affordable. However, its CO2 footprint is much higher. To enter stores, the new small brand is very difficult. To convince a municipality, a public institution, or a serious companies to use something new is often quite impossible, as they use established dealers with well-known brands. The producers of wooden products often produce also plastic ones or those with a lot of chemicals. Since it's cheaper, people like them and buy them. As these products are cheaper, they can throw them away more frequently. So to conclude a little bit this presentation from a little bit different aspect than you other have presentations, the price of devastation of environment will pay next generations, if there be any. But why should we care about that? Or should we care about that? The question is how to redirect this perspective, how to raise the awareness of that. Perhaps, for the start, with giving a chance to nature-based products in public spaces, in urban landscapes. So, thank you. That was all from me.
Briefly present a few ideas about circular management of resources. As I mentioned, so we are dealing with sustainable management of resources, mainly water, but as water is related to food and to energy, and we have also many other materials that we can recover from water and from wastewater, so we can talk about circular management of resources. So I will briefly present the latest findings from our cost action, which is called Circular City. And we have a little bit more than 1 year ahead in this project. So basically, what does it mean, circular city? Circular city is a city that manages to reduce the import of fresh resources and to reduce the amount of waste. And this can be done with suitable management of resources. What we have identified here is 7 challenges in cities that should be addressed, that actually cities have when they try to shift their predominantly linear metabolism into circular one. And these 7 challenges are how to restore and maintain the natural water cycle, because as we know, urban areas are interrupting this cycle by introducing more and more impervious areas. Then, of course, we have waste and water and waste treatment, recovery and reuse. Wastewater is a resource, not a waste, and it should be treated as such. How to recover nutrients and how to reuse them, for example, in urban agriculture from wastewater. Then how to recover materials and how to reuse them. How to successfully grow food and biomass in the urban area from local resources, and how to be energy efficient, and how to recover energy, for example, also from wastewater, and of course, building system recovery. These are the challenges that we have identified, and we are addressing them systematically. Nature-based solutions are not the only solutions that can help us to overcome these challenges. However, they are a very important part, and in this particular project, we are focused on nature-based solutions for overcoming these circularity challenges and achieving more circular metabolism in cities. So we can move on. Based on that, we came up with kind of classification of nature-based solutions and into units, into more technological units, into supporting units, and interventions. So nature-based solutions, interventions. Not to go too much into detail of this scheme, but as I mentioned, nature-based solutions are not the only, and nature-based solutions alone cannot achieve circularity. So that's why we are introducing in this project also supportive units to nature-based solutions that can help achieving circularity. So finally, I would like to pass, of course, we have, within this project, we have assessed these nature-based solutions on how successfully they achieve each of the mentioned challenges. And this is still work in progress. And at this point, I would like to mention that here we are also dealing with urban indicators, and we are developing circularity indicators. So we are attaching to existing sustainability indicators schemes, and we are investigating how implementing nature-based solutions for achieving these goals can affect and can impact on these known indicators. So we can, Mansa, I think we can pass on the last slide. So just to pass the key messages from this work, shifting from linear to circular management of resources, it's not just a wish, but it's a necessity. And more cities or cities in general are aware of that. And if we ask ourselves, why cities? Because the major demand for resources comes from cities. So, and if we manage to deal with these resources in a way that we reduce the waste and we reduce the demand for fresh resources, I think we can also impact, we can also mitigate the climate change impacts, the resources depletion, and of course, reduce the degradation of ecosystems. And introducing nature-based solutions is basically can facilitate this transition into circular management. And one of the most appreciated characteristics of nature-based solutions that also engineers are very much fond of are their multifunctionality and the numerous co-benefits that they are offering. I will just give you a brief example. We can build a green wall, for example, to treat our wastewater, but at the same time, this green wall can serve as an insulation facade, can provide amenity, can increase urban biodiversity, and so on. And this is more and more appreciated and hopefully will become more and more implemented. Thank you very much.
Looks like Roisin has vanished again on us. And so I'm going to go and do my wee bit and hopefully Roisin will come back. Just to let everybody on the call know there's Roisin coming back now, which is great. I'll keep talking till she wants to introduce me. The admin have given Manka and myself the blue button control. So if Roisin vanishes off again, we will be able to bring people in from the Q&A. Roisin, do you want to do a final intro bit and then I'll talk?
Okay, thanks, Gillian, jumping in there. Apologies, my reception is falling down on me. We just want to finish by introducing Gillian, who's going to speak about silos and disruptive practices. She's from Glasgow, and she'll introduce herself more fully and her presentation. And then we do encourage you to take part in the if you want to jump on board after this part of the session. Gillian, over to you. Thank you so much.
That's okay. I am going to go relatively quickly to allow people a chance to join in with this conversation. I am about to disrupt you, hopefully, having already probably disrupted you as people jumped on and off of the call. And I apologise now because although I am in Scotland, I speak at Scottish speed, but in not an accent. So hopefully you will understand what I am saying. So we will go for it. I am a town planner. I was abysmal at biology. I don't know one species from another, and I don't particularly need to know. And open spaces come in all formats, and the biggest open space in Glasgow is called the River Clyde, although most people wouldn't acknowledge that as an open space, but it will give them the benefits of an open space. Traditionally, within local authorities, we tend to work in silos. So I work within a planning service, there's a housing service, a park service, a road service, and that means it's easy to stay in your silo and deal with the issues on a single subject basis. So I'm dealing with roads, or I'm dealing with a planning application, or I'm dealing with this, where this tree is going to go, and I am not looking at anything else because that's not my job. It also allows us to be part of the problem. So if there are problems, projects can be sidelined. It's nice to have rather than an integral part of the project. We sometimes talk in Glasgow about zombie projects where we've got some really good projects, but in order to get funding, we chop out all the nature-based solutions because they're not needed to get the funding for an economic return, just because of the way we account things. So we end up with a project that we really didn't want in the first place, delivering what we really didn't want, in the wrong place, for the wrong people, at the wrong time. But we can tick a box because we've had funding and we've delivered on somebody else's agenda rather than the city's agenda itself. So when people talk about ecosystem services or they talk about biodiversity net zero, others go, oh, that's lovely. You know, that's really great, but do we really need that? Because we need to build houses, or we need to open the shops again, or we need this economic recovery. So we'll just pat you on the head and say, that's lovely, and we'll come back to you later when we've got a little bit of money. So in order to disrupt and to get people thinking in a different way, we started talking about a place-based approach with nature-based solution framing or focus or lens. We've started to say to people that all strategies, policies, tasks, any actions that a council do are nature-based solutions and they're a place-based approach. That means that we should be doing no harm in any of those actions that we take to social cohesion, whether that's the community of people or habitat or species, health and well-being, again, human and health and species, the economy, the environment and biodiversity. If any of our actions are doing any harm to any of them, we need to pause and ask ourselves why. It is no longer any good to do something just for an economic reason. We have to take everything along with us and realise that doing harm to our biodiversity, harm to our community, will actually do serious damage to our economic returns. If the action is doing harm, then it's not a nature-based solution, and it's definitely not a place-based approach. And therefore we should be redesigning or reimagining or mitigating what we're doing, and we need to take a better approach. Also, most projects and funding streams deal with the planning and delivery. They don't talk about the stewardship. So we're great at getting funding for the planning and the delivery, and then we cross our fingers and hope to heck that somebody will look after it for us afterwards. What that tends to do is that we end up in another cycle in 5 years' time when something needs to be renewed of planning and delivery. We don't actually think about the long-term sustainability. And especially if there's something that's a nature-based solution or it's seen as green, then the stewardship of that is a wing and a prayer, because it's seen as a negative asset on the local authorities' books. It's not financed in the same way that buildings and roads are, and it's not seen as a positive asset. So whilst we can say that doing nature-based solutions or doing urban landscapes can give us a positive return on health and well-being, that positive financial benefit goes into social work or it goes into the health service, and we don't get that back out. At that point, I will stop and leave you with all those thoughts. Back over to you, Rashid.
Thank you so much. I think like all of our panelists have such deep and wide visions and experience, and we hope you in the audience will take part as well with your own experience as well. Gillian, that was amazing. Very much what we see happening on the ground all over Europe, this siloed approach that in fairness to local authorities all over Europe, we are seeing efforts to break down this and create multidisciplinary platforms to achieve nature-based solutions and different place-based solutions. And I think you're bang on with the approach that needs to be taken in there as well, and I'm sure our panelists would agree. We have Adrian here from Dunleary. Adrian, do you want to come on board? He has a point for Barbara. He agrees on the emphasis of strategic at-scale approach to nature-based solutions, critical to achieving impacts. And how do we see that shift in emphasis happening? Is it through planning, or is it through dialogue? Or we could put this question really to all of our panelists and start the discussion with that. What do you think? Barbara, if you want to start.
Thank you. Yes, I think through all the presentations we've heard, everyone actually tackled this kind of problem, because everyone can bring this small stone into the big mosaic, how the system could actually work. I would just briefly refer to the project we just completed for, it is a report about the nature-based solutions and their role and support for the strategic and non-strategic spatial planning for the Ministry of Spatial Planning and Environment here in Slovenia. And the problem is a bit here what Gillian was saying. There is this silo thinking. There are those sectors actually each on its side. That there is no communication between those who are involved, that at the end of the day we see some changes in places. So I think what Damian tried to say was actually the awareness rising. We still need to do all those little steps at all the levels, from the general public to the actually authorities, that we will be able to move forward. I quite like that we share the ideas here, and that I could recognize the similar points raised. So at the moment, things are not moving yet. Everything is done in talking. This is what I can say from my experiences and my actually involvement with other sectors, researchers and planning sectors.
Oh, Roisin's back again, or we've lost somebody. I was just going to add to what Barbara was saying, that it's sometimes difficult to shift people out of their silos. It's sometimes difficult to get them to think outside their professional expertise, because sometimes people are risk averse rather than risk aware, and they're too scared to make mistakes. So sometimes that means that people do what they've always done. They do the same thing they've done year after year after year. And sometimes stuff like nature-based solutions is seen as scary and different, and therefore it's a risky thing to get involved in. And it's maybe not what you should do as a roads engineer, or what you should do as a parks operative, for instance. What do you think, Roisin?
I think what's key, I think we have these policies now for climate change and biodiversity, but we need resource put into creating resources at planning level for these kind of breakdown in silos, and targeted towards that, to finding solutions, nature-based solutions, how we can implement them, how we can bring stewardship on board, and really kind of frame some funding for this kind of new disruption in how we work together, because these different perspectives that come from different silos are very important. So yeah, what do you think? What's been your experience? Because I know you do work with multidisciplinary teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things which I've found very useful in general, and I would see that there are, if you like, cultural differences between Ireland, for example, and the Netherlands, which are quite interesting. But one of the icebreakers, you might say, in terms of moving these processes forward, is the idea of research through design. And in the Netherlands, for example, there's an important body called the Creative Funds Industry, and they actually fund designers, architects, furniture makers to look at innovation, to look at new questions within the cities, within landscapes, and to finance research based around that. And I think people generally are very visual. I think most people want to do new things. Most people realize there's a real problem. And of course, there's always the issue of the economic analysis that people just can't really believe in some of these things. So it's a step-by-step process to move people from actually seeing what could happen, demonstrating the benefits, and then actually taking the next step to deliver pilots, small examples where you can try out things. And we've tried to do this, for example, in our flood protection project, to take an example of an area and actually start with that. And they're quite important because you can develop your learnings, you can then reassess, and then you can begin to apply. So it's a difficult thing to do in some cultures, like in the UK, because of and in Ireland, by the way, because of the risk aversion. Other countries have a very different system, like in the Netherlands, where it's a lot more possible, and where people are prepared to do that. And we call them bureaucratic entrepreneurs. So people who work within the cities actually have the mandate to try things out and take risks, and that's very beneficial. So I think that some of those points are quite interesting for breaking down silos.
Okay, what do you think, Natasha?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, we need to realize that the problem itself, it's quite complex, and it involves really a lot of knowledge from different disciplines. And on the other hand, our educational system is still pretty much, although we see some progress, but it's pretty much silos based. So this is one thing, and once you get into practice, it's very difficult to break these habits. This is one thing, and the other thing is that, at least from the resources management side, we are missing some basic practical things like standards. Take, for example, urban drainage. I mean, of course, we have standards for sizing pipes. But we don't have standards for infiltration elements and so on. And then, of course, engineers are scared because they are responsible for what they are doing. And if things are not working, it's kind of difficult. And whereas if you have standards behind, then it's much more comfortable to design things, to put things in place and so on. And then also, if we stay with resources, it's also a fact that we don't have water reuse standards for urban areas, for example. We would like to reuse all the water. We would like to, I don't know, to keep resources in cycle, and we can do this with nature-based solutions. But sometimes these solutions are not backed by legislation. So there are quite some practical obstacles out there. Although I agree that people are open to new things, they would like to implement them, and I think the society is quite, how to say, in favor to nature-based solutions. But it's actually not so easy to implement them sometimes. So there is progress, and also there is progress in curriculums and in education, but it obviously takes time for these things to become more, for these things to be mainstreamed, I would say.
Okay, thank you. That's great. From Tassie Thompson, do any of the panel know of multidisciplinaries who have written interdisciplinary required as a required objective of a funding spend? Gillian?
I'm going to kind of twist it slightly because Tassie's based in Norway. I know that because we connect via Twitter. So welcome, Tassie. In Scotland, we have a new plate assessment that's coming into legislation that we won't be able to sign off our development plan, so our spatial land use plan, until we've done a plate accessibility assessment. We're not quite sure yet how that's going to be developed to fit in. We know, for instance, that in Wales they've created miles of spreadsheets, but it doesn't actually tell you whether a place is playable or not. And there is some guidance coming on open space strategies that may that will tie in that play assessment, and that may then link the open space strategy more strategically to the development plan. But we're being asked in Scotland to talk to kids more about, or young people more about, how they interact with spaces, what they want to use spaces for, and there are more regulations coming through. And I think the UK, although we're out of Europe, is mirroring some of that European legislation that says you should be listening to the voices of the young people. So I don't know whether that answers Tassie's question. She may wish to press the blue button and join us for the conversation. But that's the kind of take in Scotland. They're trying to legislate for it and get us to listen to and understand the voices of the young people and bring that into how we think about designing spaces and places.
Yeah, I don't. Sorry, I couldn't hear you that well on that last point there, Gillian.
Sorry, I was just kind of saying there's different legislation that's around. I think in the UK, we're probably tracking what's coming in Europe, where everybody is being asked to take more cognizance of young folks' views in the design of the places and spaces that they're interacting in. I don't know whether Patrick has a view from the kind of landscape community. I'm talking from the planning community, but certainly we're being asked to talk to young people more. And the other thought I kind of have is that whatever we do with those spaces and places, it's our young folk that are going to have to live with the consequences far longer than I'm ever going to have to live with them, for instance. Patrick, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm going to respond there. Faces and Places, I think, sounds like a fantastic idea. And I see that I've been working in the profession for nearly 25 years, and I see that becoming much more mainstream. So it's been there for quite a while. But I think this idea of really understanding how people, whether you're 3 years old or 4 years old or even older, how people respond and what people actually need. So I think it's the fact that it's becoming more of an integrated part is very positive. So I think I see that happening across the board. So I think the whole idea of shareholders and of groups, whether it's also farmers or whether it's villagers, I do see that there's a much more of a tilt back towards that way of planning and that way of thinking, and that's hugely beneficial, because I think I said at the very beginning this idea of co-creation and community. The more you test your designs with community, the stronger and better they're going to be, and also not just your designs but also your ideas for the future, and being able to project ideas into the future and giving people the space to think. It's really incredible what the kind of responses you can get. So I know we're working on, for example, little villages, master plans, and so on, and just how people get completely animated and enthusiastic about how they can begin to change their surroundings and how positive that can be, and how each change should hopefully lead to a catalyst for the next one, whether it's more sustainable mobility, whether it's a greener public realm, whether it's kind of a local water management system in terms of the outdoor space. And that also goes into issues of, for example, dereliction, and also the idea of social businesses, how local people can be organized to set up local economies that transmit back into their own economies, and how that can have a beneficial effect again for housing, and the people can flow through into the next layer of housing. So it's again, like Natasha was saying, these ideas of closing these linear systems into circular systems, and about really listening to what local people are saying and giving them the space, and also then giving I think other professionals like Gillian and so on the room to kind of dream and the room to imagine and develop new policies. So it's bringing all these things together, I think, as you take those steps forward.
Yeah, Roisin, are you with us? I'm aware of the time, so you may wish to bring us home in the next 3-4 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's fascinating, and we're getting some wonderful comments in from the chat as well. To close now, we could go on speaking to each other for another long time, I would say. Just to close, we want to thank everybody so much for being part of this panel and discussion, and all the comments on class chat and Q&A, and look forward to the rest of. We'd like to close now by a final comment. What would you say to policymakers? What would your one disruption be towards harmony? Barbara, can we start with you, please?
For the policymakers, the question was for the policymakers. Okay, I would simply like to advise them, sit together more often, listen to each other and discuss, and then understand. Actually, I think what nature-based solutions, they bring this brilliant idea to address the society, the environment, and the kind of economy and business together. And this is really an opportunity to make step forward for sustainable development. Actually, we've had it for ages ago, but now maybe with this concept we can really move on. So if they continue working on that ideas and trying to understand those nature-based solution backgrounds, and to understand that nature-based solutions are solutions, this is probably the first thing I'd like to advise, to understand that this is about solutions. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I just take this opportunity also to thank Monica, who's been working in the chat. Wonderful work. Natasha, what would you say to policymakers as a disruption?
Well, it's difficult to advise something really, say, efficient to policymakers, but I would say. I agree with the comment in the chat that implementation is really the biggest problem. And we are all, I think, aware of the complexity of the problem. And for the policymakers, I would say just rely on good evaluation tools and trust science, I would say. And as for the scientific community, I think we have come to realize quite some years ago that we need to connect. And there was a comment about funding interdisciplinary research. And I don't think you can get any Horizon project or any European project without emphasizing interdisciplinarity and links to the community. So I think strategically wise, we are on a good way, but maybe we are missing on the implementation side. And for this, I would advise policymakers to support more pilots, more experiments, because this is the only way how we can really learn and how people can really see that these things work.
Thank you. Gillian, could you come on board? I'm not sure if we're going to get cut off.
Yeah, I'll go quickly. As a policy maker, I would say be risk averse. Start again. Be risk aware, not risk averse. It's all about a place. So what makes a space into a place? Because people have an attachment to places. And the other bit I would say is ask the map. If it's all about a place, then there's spatial data out there and everything is anchored to a place, whether that's how you pay your council tax, where you went to school, where you play, where you walk, where you take your library book back. There is data out there and we need to ask the map. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Danjan? You need to unmute, please.
Well, I think this knowing what some society, some people who are living in some place think about the solution is a good thing, but often we face the problems with people from different fields to be able to understand and to each other and to cooperate. So this interdisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity is usually just a word, but not present at the implementation. And so policymakers should think about connecting people from different fields and making them able to work with each other, with each other's knowledge.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you so much. Patrick, a closing point?
I'd like to just echo what Danjan and Natasha were saying there, and that is that giving space, I think, for experiment is important for policymakers, and also starting small. The idea of pilots that Natasha was talking about, and then scaling up. I think they're really, really important. And maybe just above and beyond, we can't just wait for policymakers. It's kind of everybody's responsibility, in a sense, to take action and to do their part. So I think we don't need to wait for policymakers. We can do something ourselves today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Very positive ideas, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you to everybody for this session, and we'll leave it now. And thanks to everybody who contributed to the chat. I'm sorry for answering everybody's questions.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Shasheen, you did well under difficult circumstances and everyone with us, so it was brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.